What's up? Big Herc 916. Positivity, motivation. Never settle for average. You know, we do it over here. Go to bigherc916.com, pick you up some merch, grab you a hat, a t-shirt, a custom hoodie, or a bar of soap, and wash your ass. You know, I was just thinking this morning about Labor Day and what is the meaning of Labor Day? Because, you know, people celebrate a lot of holidays and different functions, and they don't really know what it means. It's just an opportunity for them to drink, hang out, party, act silly, and they don't really know the history of it. So going through IG and then looking up some information online, I found out about the history of Labor Day. And it's really about the Pullman. And if you don't know about the Pullman, those were the people, the black men who worked in hospitality in the actual railroad cars. So this was a really big union back in the day and a big part of the labor force, but it's not something we've heard about in our history. And a lot of history has been purposely left out to make black people in particular feel insufficient. And in my mind, when you feel insufficient or have a sense of inferiority, you tend to behave a certain way and think that that behavior is justified because of your lack of significance in society. And therefore, you kind of project a really low frequency energy. But the Pullman neighborhood on Chicago's South Side is a small community that changed the country. This Labor Day, the doors of the factory at the heart of this beautiful model town were reopened to public as a new visitor center, the cornerstone of Pullman National Monument. So Chicago was the base for this Pullman movement, which actually created what we have today, the Labor Day. Pullman is central to understanding industry, labor, and civil rights in America and intense conflicts that led to the creation of Labor Day and the first African American Union. As part of the grand opening, visitors can learn about some of the everyday workers whose names are largely unknown and who organize alongside famous national figures that have significant impact on our country's history. Now, why wasn't that put in our history books? That the first African American Union was the Pullman Union. See what I'm saying, man? It's just like, and I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat, you know, dude, a lot of things are meant to keep black people in their place. Just straight up, man. And black people, unless they start waking up and really stop believing in this so-called I'm gonna help you mentality, and with that comes an attachment, we're never gonna get out of this shit. We're never gonna get out. You gotta hold these people accountable. You can't just give away your vote for nothing. What are you getting in return? Jeannie Curtis and Ed Nixon are two of the lesser known heroes who were part of the struggle for human rights, and the reason we still celebrate Labor Day. In 1894, Jeannie Curtis was a 23-year-old seamstress in debt to industrial titan George Pullman. Pullman had created an empire building and servicing train cars and felt like hotels on wheels. Curtis sewed the luxurious drapes, pillows, tablecloths, and other refinements that filled these cars. She worked in the Pullman Car Company's sprawling factory and lived in the beautifully designed but tightly controlled model town of Pullman. Curtis and Pullman were both gifted and willful, but on opposite ends of a powerhouse company that had changed the way America moved around the country. Curtis had been earning $2.25 a day, but after the economic panic of 1893, her wages were cut to 80 cents a day. Her father, also a Pullman employee, had died and left her with $60 debt. to the company. Her already tight wages were garnished, and she had to navigate verbal abuse from her supervisor and the bank. Despite being an impoverished young adult, Curtis was not without influence. She was a gifted speaker and the president of the Girls Local Union 269, which had 125 members. Her struggles were also not unique. In response to an economic downturn, Pullman had prioritized his shareholders over his workers, cut wages without dropping rent, and dug in heels as his workers' frustration grew. When Pullman dismissed requests for arbitration, the exasperated workers decided to walk off the job. The strike was relatively small, but it came shortly before a National American Railway Union convention hosted in Chicago. At the ARU convention, members considered whether to throw their national weight behind the Pullman workers. Curtis was one of the most electrifying speakers at the convention. She connected the struggles of her fellow Pullman workers with the injustice faced by so many in the room and argued that it will go on, brothers, forever unless you, the American Railway Union, stop it, end it, crush it out. And also, I say, come along with us for the decent conditions everywhere. That afternoon, she was one of 12 union leaders who entered the Pullman administration office and asked bluntly, will you arbitrate? Again, the management refused to even acknowledge their grievances. The ARU did come along, though. 8 days later, with Pullman's heels firmly planted, 125,000 workers on 29 railways refused to move trains that included Pullman cars. The train traveled throughout much of the country, ground to a halt. The strike came at a heavy price, despite the best efforts of ARU President Eugene Debs to maintain calm. Workers, law enforcement, and rail management went to toe-to-toe over who controlled the railways around the country, leading to significant violence when angry strike supporters set fire to a rail car full of U.S. mail. President Grover Cleveland and his attorney general, who had previously worked for railway owners, used the incident to criminalize efforts by union leaders and sent federal troops to Chicago to crush the strike. In the end, Curtis and the other Pullman workers were allowed to return to work only if they signed documents refusing future union membership. Crushing a strike deeply undercut Pullman's reputation as a visionary and threatened political support for Cleveland. The president was the leader of the Democratic Party, which has strong labor support. Just as Cleveland was coming down hard on the side of management, he signed legislation that would make Labor Day a national holiday. It was a symbolic victory that attempted to smooth over the heavy blow to unions and temper the backlash from voters who were sympathetic to the Pullman strikers. See what I'm saying, man? This shit is so much in our history that if we could reflect back on life lessons, a lot of what's going on today would not be going on, and we would see better representation in our legislation and in our local communities. The ignorance that's being promoted, the lack of thinking, it's just really, it's disgusting, man, to see that people aren't really taking the time to be held accountable for their actions, and then we're endorsing or promoting behavior that's contrary to the elevation of consciousness. I was just listening to somebody the other day, and he was pretty much saying that, you know, you're up in the club, you're getting lit to serial killer music. Serial killer music, multiple homicides within the song against your own people, and you're celebrating that. Why are you celebrating that? These people, man, these our black elders sacrificed a lot to get to where we're at today, and to have representation and to have the respect, and here we are destroying it. I'm not saying all of you, but I'm saying the narrative, that's what they want us to emulate. They don't want us to emulate excellence. They don't promote that. They promote the dumb shit because the dumb shit helps them win votes. Just like in all these cities where basically all these businesses are shut down. And see, you say, oh, it's these businesses are, they're exploiting the people. No, 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 no. People purchase regardless. If you had a business, then they would purchase from you. But your business would be part of the looting too. So at the end of the day, it all ties in. They make you think like these businesses, and I'm saying what they do is when they knock those businesses out, now then a super business comes in, and now you're stuck at one price. See, it goes right back to the penitentiary. You got one commissary. In the penitentiary, you can't buy from nobody but the one commissary. That's what they're doing. One commissary, one city, one grocery store, one mart, whatever. All one. You have no choice. Because they done wiped out the little guy, the guy who had the bodega on the corner, the guy who had the little mini mart. They done robbed him blind. Purposely by design, they've created that psychology. But like I said, all ties in back to Black history because we don't know our history, therefore we repeat ignorant behavior or do things that create ignorant behavior, which doesn't further our whole agenda, which the agenda going forward was to create a civil rights balance so that we could go and have the benefits of those who weren't Black and be able to create opportunity for ourselves. But they reversed that. Total reversal, man. I never knew about this. The Pullman strike. Come on, man. Labor Day, it's a Black holiday. It's us. It's a Black holiday. Because of Blacks who stopped working in slave conditions in these damn train cars is why we have a Labor Day. But we up in the club, partying, doing this, shooting out at barbecues, not even thinking of what was sacrificed. Going back to Chicago, man. Long after the Pullman strike and the first official Labor Day in 1894, Pullman porters, African-American workers excluded from earlier unions, continued to influence the national fight for civil rights. When Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus on December 1st, 1955, the man who bailed her out of jail was Ed Nixon. The next morning, it was Nixon who called a young pastor named Martin Luther King and asked him to lead a boycott of the city bus system. Nixon had little to no formal education, but had served as a Pullman porter and union member for decades. Pullman porters such as Nixon were the do-everything staff who serviced the Pullman train cars. His career gave him a path to the middle class and broad exposure to America as the trains crisscrossed the country. As Nixon later told author and historian Studs Terkel, when a porter walked into a barbershop, everybody listened because they know the porter had been everywhere and they never been anywhere themselves. But porters also endured brutal 100-hour work weeks, carried bags, served drinks, shined shoes, dealt with unruly children, prepared beds, diplomatically dealt with hangovers and discretions and everything in between. Without tips, the porter's pay would not have been enough to survive on, and racism was ever present. In interactions with passengers, threats from Jim Crow America, the basic caste system that divided passengers and servers. Jeannie Curtis had been able to join the railway union in part because Eugene Debs had made a strong pitch for women to have a role. Debs had made a similar pitch for African American involvement, but members voted 112 to 110 against the measure, part of a long track record of white unions excluding Black workers. The porters galvanized and formed their own union in 1925. The union was led by Philip Randolph, who would go on to lead the March on Washington in 1963 and introduce King before the famous I Have a Dream speech. The earlier years of organizing were rough as they faced very real threats and had few allies, but they endured and won. 12 years to the day after the porters formed their union, they signed their first contract with Pullman Car Company. This organizing experience and expectation that victory was possible empowered porters such as Nixon to play influential roles the early years of the civil rights movement. Porters donated their union halls for meetings, carried Black newspapers to the South, promoted anti-lynching campaigns, and helped plot the Freedom Rise of 1961 and more. Nixon was also forcing his community He had been a president of Montgomery and Alabama branches of the NAACP and the first African American in 20th century to run for office in Montgomery. His prominence and courage made him both a hero and a target. His home in Montgomery, the first to be bombed during civil rights protests in 1960s. Ironically, if you're not for the long hours away from home that his job required, Nixon would have likely led the Montgomery bus boycott himself. Like so many other labor and civil rights advocates who put themselves at risk in the pursuit of equity, Curtis and Nixon's names were not included in school history books, but at Pullman, the National Park Service, and partners such as the Philip Randolph Pullman Porter Museum and Historic Pullman Foundation capture stories like theirs and illustrate how those threads remain as relevant as ever. So yeah, man, man, blacks, we got so much more that we should be proud of besides, shaking ass and showing guns and riding on our ops, man. You know what I mean? We glamorize, going on your ops. We glamorize, you got to check in. You got to check in. You got to do this and do that. And you got all these black men who sacrifice their life for us to have a better life. Where's the respect for each other, man? You don't even know that Labor Day is because of black men and a black woman who came together to unite those for a greater cause. And they brought in, through that unification, whites who supported their stand because they brought in the American Railway Union. Imagine that. When we work together, what we can accomplish. See, it's not a fight among black and white. It's among the poor, because if you're part of the people getting exploited for these shit wages, you need to take a stand. Just like in these cities and communities where they make a bunch of promises and keep on exploiting. Hey man, that's the history on Labor Day. Black history and how it relates to Labor Day. Big Herc 916. I didn't start off as a bad kid. Officially, I only got one real spanking my entire life. My mom did the best a 14-year-old could do, raising me with love and instilling values that will last a lifetime. I was a straight-A student and lived to make her happy. So how did I go astray? A horrible stepdad that stole my self-worth and invoked fear turned me into a person that I struggled to overcome. From skateboarding to selling drugs, gangbanging in juvenile hall, I got caught the same way many young promising men get caught up. I struggled to find my identity, getting mixed up in shootouts, crime, and the adult entertainment industry. This roller coaster continued as I juggled college, hustling, and Hollywood, eventually catching a federal bank robbery case. I found redemption in prison while serving a 120-month federal sentence and came out a man on a mission. I became a social media influencer with over 500 million views on YouTube and a life coach mentoring people all over the world. This is my journey against all odds. Go to BigHerc916.com and purchase you a bar of soap, one of the books I've written, a hat, a beanie, a t-shirt, tank top, or some detail spray for your car. Lockdown's over. Get your yard time in. Exclusively at FreshOutSeries.com.